Stretching is a great form of exercise, but there are some stretches that almost no one over the age of 50 should do. And in today's video, I'm going to show you what those stretches are and give you some alternatives instead. If you don't know who I am, my name is Harlow and I'm the Over-Fifties specialist physio here at HT Physio in Farnham. And today I'm going to be revealing the 4 worst stretches for people over the age of 50 and provide some better alternatives. Now, I love stretching as an exercise form. It's brilliant for lengthening muscles and improving mobility around different joints in the body. But there are some stretches that, even though they stretch muscles, they also put you at a higher risk of injury. So I'm going to reveal the 4 worst stretches today that I think most people over the age of 50 should avoid. Obviously, this advice is not suitable for everyone. So if you enjoy these stretches and they're safe for you, please don't feel like you have to stop them. But for most people, there are better alternatives. So let's have a look at the bad stretches and I'll show you exactly what you should do instead. So here are some of the worst stretches for people over the age of 50. And as I mentioned, there's nothing wrong with these stretches. I just think there's better alternatives for most people over 50. So the first stretch I don't really like is what we call the hurdler's stretch. And the hurdler's stretch looks something like this. So you've got your leg going out behind you like this. There's a big angle here. You can see I'm into hip extension and then I'm leaning forward on this knee here. And this is a stretch for the hip flexor. So it's a stretch for the muscle at the front of the hip here. Now, the reason I don't particularly like this is because this stretch can be quite stressful for the hip joint. And the other reason I don't really like it is because we have less control over this stretch because someone's body weight is going straight over this leg, and it can put a lot of stress on that psoas muscle. The other reason I don't particularly like it is because it's a completely passive stretch. There's no active component to this stretch at all. We don't have any muscles that are contracting. We're just pushing our hip into a position and trying to stretch it that way. So for those reasons, there is a better alternative if you want to stretch your hip flexors and your psoas, and that is to do an active hip flexor stretch. So it's very similar in the setup. What we're going to do is still stay down on this one knee bent position like this, but this time we want to keep good upright posture. And all we're going to do here, resting 2 hands on the knees, is squeeze the glutes and tuck the pelvis underneath us. Now, I can get a much better stretch in my hip flexor coming down the front of the leg by doing this than I can forcing myself into this position. I've actually met people who have injured their labrum by doing this stretch, but doing this nice gentle one where we just tuck underneath us like this is much less risky for the hip and also for other parts of the leg too. Now, the other benefit of doing it this way is you get an active contraction of your glutes, which means you're working on activating the glutes at the same time as stretching the hip flexors. So it's a double benefit. So you're going to get more bang for your buck doing this one, and it's a lot safer. When you're doing these exercises, I recommend that you hold them for 30 seconds. Never do these exercises if they cause you pain. Never do them against the advice of your doctor, and try and do them regularly if you find them beneficial. Doing them 3 or 4 times a day seems to be the best for most stretches, as opposed to just doing them once or twice. So that's the first stretch I don't like. Let's have a look at the second one and an alternative. The second stretch I'm not a fan of for over 50s is the splits stretch, which is where we get the feet as wide as we possibly can to try and stretch the muscles on the inside of the thighs. Now, I can feel quite a stretch on my adductors doing this, but I don't feel that safe in this position, especially now I'm wearing socks on carpet. All it would take is a small slip for one of my legs to slip away from me and I'd be in massive trouble. The other reason I don't particularly like this stretch is because one side is pretty much always tighter than the other. And if we're trying to stretch both at the same time in a position where our body weight's going through us, what we tend to do is find that someone will compensate to try and protect themselves from the tight side. So we don't end up getting an even stretch. The other reason I don't like this position is because all of our body weight is going through the stretch position, which means that we don't have that much control and it's very, very easy to overstretch. Again, I've met people who have injured themselves doing this. So I'm going to show you a better way to stretch the adductors on the inside of the leg. We're going to do the seated adductor stretch, which is a nice way to replace what we've just done. So I will do this sitting on the floor, but you can do this sitting on your bed with your back up against the headrest. And what we're going to do here is we're going to bring our feet together, sitting in a nice upright position with the back supported. Now you're going to take two hands and grab your feet and just gently pull your feet towards you. If you can't grab your feet because you're out here, what you're instead going to do is have your hands here and gently push down and away. So that should give you a better stretch in here. And this, if you can grab your feet, will allow you to get even more of a stretch in the adductors as well. It's also a nice stretch for the hip because it takes us into what we call a Faber position, which is flexion, abduction, and external rotation, which should improve the health of the hip joint. It's also a controlled position. If you're not comfortable, you can start up here and just very slowly encourage yourself down. And if you find yourself getting pain, it's a very easy stretch to stop. Whereas the other one, you're already in a high risk position because it's harder to get out of it. Again, holding for 30 seconds tends to work really well. And once you've done that, you should have had a nice stretch in the inside of your legs and also good work on the mobility in your hips. Another alternative to this stretch, if you still want to do something standing up, is to just do one side at a time. And this is a lot safer than doing both at the same time. So what I would do for this is just take a slightly wider than shoulders stance like this and then bend one knee until you feel the stretch coming down one side. Now the reason this is different is because less body weight is going through the stretchy part. We're also just controlled because we've got our leg bent on this side, which means that if this one's suffering, we can just quickly pull it back in, and there's a lot less stress going through the joints here. So instead of doing both at the same time, I'd recommend doing one at a time like this if you wish to do it standing up. Now the next stretch I don't particularly like for people over the age of 50 is the sit and reach. So I see people trying to do this all the time. We used to do it in kids football when I was younger as almost like a warm-up or a cool down. But sitting and reaching, even though it does stretch the hamstrings, it also does a couple of things we don't want. One thing it does do is it really rounds the lower back, and if people are straining to come forward, they can end up straining their lower back. And the other thing that happens is if you're one of those people who's able to grab your toes, if you pull your toes up towards you, you're not just stretching the hamstrings anymore, you're stretching the sciatic nerve, which for most people is not a good idea. So that's probably one of the worst hamstring stretches you can do, but stretching the hamstrings is a good thing for most people, provided you haven't got sciatica. So I'm going to show you an alternative now. A better alternative for stretching the hamstrings is the seated hamstring stretch. So for this, you need a chair. You're just going to come to the edge of it like this. You're going to straighten out the leg to be stretched, keeping that set of toes relaxed and floppy. Put both hands on the bent knee, sit up tall and hinge forward from the hips. So we're not rounding the spine, we're keeping the spine straight and hinging from the hips. Now we should find that we get a stretch coming down the back of the leg there. We want to keep just a slightly soft knee. We don't want to lock the knee out, keep it slightly soft. You'll still get a really nice stretch in your hamstrings, and then holding that for 30 seconds is a brilliant way to stretch the muscle without stretching any of the unwanted parts as well. I'll show you the other side. So you straighten this leg out, you keep the foot floppy, soft knee, put your weight on both hands on the bent knee, back straight, and just come forward like this. And you're going to get a stretch coming down the back of the leg here. So that's a much better alternative than doing the seated double hamstring stretch. I can't see any benefits to doing it that way. This way is much better for almost everyone over the age of 50. Now the next stretch I don't really like for people over the age of 50 is the double quad stretch. And the double quad stretch, as you might have guessed, starts in this position here. So for many people over 50 already, this is off the menu because they don't have the knee mobility to do it. Now the thing about the double quad stretch is it is quite a good stretch for people who can do it, but most people can't, including myself, which means that they're going to do it wrong. So the stretch looks something like this. You're supposed to wind yourself all the way back, lying backwards onto your shoulders with your knees bent here. Now I can't do that, and the reason I can't do that is because I've got a problem with my ankle. So if you have any issues with your ankle here, you're not going to be able to get your foot fully flat, which means you can't come back like this. I also have quite tight quads, and coming back like this makes me feel unsafe because I feel like I'm going to tear the muscle. So for many people who try and do this unsuccessfully, there's a much better alternative. So I'm going to show you a far better way to stretch your quads, which is a good thing to do because obviously tight quads can cause problems like knee pain. So I'm going to show you an alternative. You need a bed to do it rather than the floor, and then hopefully it will be much easier. So here's the alternative stretch we're going to do. You're going to lie on your side on the bed like this with the side to be stretched at the top. You're going to bring both knees up towards you, and then you're going to bring the one you're going to stretch right up as high as you can. You're going to hold the area just above your ankle and then very gently bring that leg out behind you. Now, if you've got a bad knee or a painful knee, what you can do is keep the knee less bent and bring the leg further out behind you. You'll still get a nice stretch on the quad without aggravating the knee. But if you feel you can get your heel close towards your bottom, that's fine to do. And you should get a lovely stretch at the front of the thigh without too much stress on the joints. Now, if you're one of the many people who still can't reach your ankle here, even when you've got your leg bent right up, you can use a quick workaround. All you need for this is a towel or a resistance band. I've got a loop of resistance band here. I'm going to wrap it around my ankle, and then I don't need to reach with my hands as far, and we can do exactly the same stretch without any stress on the lower back. So when you're doing this exercise, we shouldn't feel back pain. If you do have back pain, you're probably doing it wrong. So you need to have a look at your technique. Definitely use a band if you feel yourself having to strain to get your leg, but this is a much better alternative for people who can't do the double quad stretch. So those are the 4 worst stretches for people over the age of 50, in my opinion, of course. I hope that video has been useful. If it has, do drop a comment below and let me know how you got on. And if you want to get more from me, you can grab a copy of my book. It's called Thriving Beyond 50, and you can find it on Amazon using the link below. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your time in watching these videos, and I'll speak to you on the next one.